a sermon prepared, and if you want to see what that sermon's like, you need to go to the internet, to the email. But this morning I was walking on the Greenway, and that's a path in North Augusta with a dog about 6:30 in the morning. And as I was walking along, I encountered this man who was carrying all this camping gear on his back, backpack, pad, sleeping bag, all the accoutrements. And I stopped and I said, "Are you preparing to go for a camping trip?" And he said, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm preparing to walk across the country." And he said, "I realized how short life is when I had a brother who was 40 years old who dropped dead of a heart attack. Then a year later or so, my 37-year-old brother was walking down the street of Aiken with his family, had a group of young teenagers run into them, and his brother said to them, 'Where are your manners? Can't you at least say, 'Excuse me?' And as they were walking away, he was shot in the back and killed." And so this young man, whose name is Logan, who's 38 years of age, said that because life is so short, that he wanted to walk across the country, giving up his job as an engineer, to see what life is really all about, to encounter all different types of people, and to see parts of the country that he had never seen before. He walked with me as he talked. And I realized as we walked together that this young man, to me young at 38, is processing the deaths of people whom he loves. A single man who has the opportunity to do whatever he wants, he decided not to become bitter, not to become vengeful, not to say an eye for an eye and to strike back at the people who killed his brother, but instead to take those experiences, to turn them around and do something positive with his life so he can encounter all different types of people. He is a very brave person, a person who probably understands what Jesus is saying to his disciples better than I do. Because what he's really doing was taking the experiences that he had and, I would like to say, changing the DNA of those experiences. Instead of allowing them to settle into his heart and to turn it to cold blackness, cold revenge, he's taking those experiences to open himself up to the world. Jesus in today's gospel is trying to change the DNA of his disciples. Not their actual physical DNA, not who they were, not their gifts and talents. And I think too often we suppose that when Jesus says we're supposed to deny ourselves, we're supposed to give up who we are. That's not what Jesus is saying. We are who we are. And we're supposed to use those gifts and talents that we have to be who we are. Not to hide them or to give them up, but rather to use them for the glory of God. Rather, what Jesus is saying is we're supposed to take up our cross, to use the talents we have to serve God. Now, what's it mean taking up the cross? Oftentimes we assume that taking up the cross means we have to shoulder all those bad things that happen to us in life, and we often say, "Well, no, this is the cross I bear." I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's just a little teeny part of what's supposed to happen to us. Jesus is rather saying, listen up. Our son Cooper is sitting there, who I didn't know was going to be with us today, has something he says to us when he really wants us to pay attention to him. He says to us, "Do you want to hear something? Do you want to hear something?" And when Cooper says those words, "Do you want to hear something?" it means pay attention to me. I have something that I think is important and I want to share it with you. Well, Jesus is saying to us in today's gospel, listen up, people. Do you want to hear something? I'm going to tell it to you anyway. Listen up, because you're called to take up the cross. And what that means is that we are to take the words that he spoke on the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, and to really try to implement them in our lives. How that's going to happen is going to be as diverse as you and I are diverse. But listen to that. Listen to that. Blessed are those who have grief. Not just grief about people dying, but grief that the world isn't the way that God wants it to be. The grief that God's Spirit is absent in so many people's lives. Blessed are those who mourn because they do not have God. Blessed are those who bring peace to the world. Not just inner peace, but peace to the people around us. Blessed are those people who don't do an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but instead turn that around and bring peace instead of vengeance. Blessed are you who are reviled on account of me. How hard that is. How hard that is not to change that around and to want to get back at people. We are to be people who are passionate for the justice of God. To know that the justice of God is about our sharing God's love with the world, not taking justice into our own hands. All this is a little bit overwhelming at first. But if we put on our backpacks like this young man Logan did, and look at the world around us and all the beauty that's in it, and begin to ask ourselves, how has God blessed me, and to share that blessing with the world, then we can begin to see what it's like to be a follower of Christ and to take up the cross. What it means is that we have to reconstruct ourselves in a way. Reconstruct ourselves not about who we are, but how we respond to the troubles of the world. Oh, wonder Peter looked at Jesus when he said, I've got to go to Jerusalem and die, and I expect you to take up the cross and follow me. Oh, wonder, Peter said, God forbid. He was not only talking about Jesus dying, he was talking about his own self, how hard it would be to reconstruct how he wanted to react to the world. But this is exactly what Jesus had in mind. We are to reconstruct our own DNA and not respond in the way the world wants us to respond, but to respond in the way that Christ wants us to respond. The truth is, there's always a Jerusalem for each of us. There's always a place where we're going to encounter pain and death and uncertainty. But there's also another certainty here, the certainty that God is with us in the midst of it all. Sure, we walk toward Jerusalem, but we walk to Jerusalem with God. And with his presence and with his help, we can take that journey wherever it leads us. I want you today to hold in your mind this young man, Logan, who's on a trip across the United States. And know that wherever Logan goes, with the attitude he has, he's a blessing to the people around him. I'd rather say he's a modern-day disciple, sharing with the world the power of what love and forgiveness